Welcome to Late Night with Lobo. Give it up. Ooh. All right, we have a great panel here. Your finance department is still color-coding spreadsheets. Meanwhile, our folks are using AI agents to close books, run forecasts, and replace entire teams. Give it up for our wonderful panel. The CFO is dead. Long live the Chief Automation Officer, with Sowmya, ex-controller of OpenAI and Rippling, and Ahsan with SnapLogic, and former VP of Finance at Blue Jeans, and Kunal, the gorgeous man at the end from Gorgias. Come on, that's a little dull. Let's give it up for them. All right, so let's dive right in. Let's take it with Sowmya. What is one traditional CFO responsibility you see completely taken away with AI agents in the next 12 months?
That's an interesting question. I don't think responsibilities are really going away. Maybe them doing the work might go away, but in my experience with finance teams being able to do so much more, I see more responsibilities land on the plate of the CFO. But one thing that the CFO at OpenAI used to do is she would take our monthly finance close deck and run it through her custom ChatGPT template to summarize her notes to the leadership team. So something that might have taken a lot longer is now it knows her voice, it knows what to highlight, and it just ships.
How long would that take previously?
Probably about a few days of back and forth with the team, and yeah.
So when you started at OpenAI, how many people did you have in your finance team, and when you left recently?
So I started at OpenAI in the controller role in March of 2023. So that is the month that ChatGPT Plus launched, and we had about 10 people in the entire finance and accounting org. When I left, which was March 2025, we had about, I'd say maybe 30 people in accounting and 15 or so in finance.
Why did you need more, although the AI models got better?
The company went from, I don't know if this is a trick question. OpenAI is the maker of ChatGPT, and we scaled to 500 million weekly active users. It still takes humans, unfortunately.
Awesome. So with Ahsan, SnapLogic is an AI agent orchestration platform.
Yeah.
What have you done with AI agents to automate your finance department? But moreover, how big is your finance department?
The finance team is not as big. We're also not as big as OpenAI, but the finance team is 4 people. The accounting team is 8, give or take. So we're about a $100 million business.
100 million ARR business. And a lot of the AI agent companies that I talk to, they don't implement AI agents in their finance department, but you're a little different.
Yeah, I think we actually had the first live agent deployed across the company, and we were talking earlier, when we present our use case, which was essentially an order form reconciliation, right? We're an enterprise business. We have unstructured data coming out of order forms, Salesforce, PDFs, customer-initiated documents, DocuSign, everywhere. And going through that, reconciling that, getting that into the revenue systems was an immense effort. Monthly, part of close, et cetera. So someone on my finance team basically heard us pitching internally our own agent creation platform and said we could try to use this on our own finance processes. And we ended up cutting essentially a day and a half out of close, and more importantly, finding revenue that was essentially leakage. Things that were entitled that we should have been billing for. So it was, and we've done that and then built on top of it to do legal, essentially legal discovery. Where are there termination clauses? Instead of throwing bodies at it, the agent, and again, I'm kind of on the cusp. I'm a little bit So I said, why don't we get people together, have everyone look at it, and the person who built that agent said, we can just throw the agent at it, retrain it, and have it go surface all that information.
Awesome. Kunal, how big is your finance team at Gorgias, and what have you done with AI agents in the organization?
Yeah, so our FP&A team's about 6, accounting team's about 8. I also have the data analytics and the data engineering teams reporting into me, and that's a pretty big team. That's 16 people in total. So I think the reason is, like, I think it's really important for the core data team, and so our data team supports both product analytics, go-to-market analytics, but also the engineering team, which runs the underlying models. I think it's actually really critical for that to live within the office of the CFO, because we can architect the models in the right way. And I think for the finance team to be able to be kind of the accountability officer, right, to hold other people accountable, we need to have source of truth and metrics that people rely on and can trust. And so if my team can kind of create the standard data models that pipe into our billing system, that pipe into the different places, it's really important that the integrity of the underlying information in the database is really good, because that's where all the analysis is being done. That's where the agents are going in and importing information and running analysis. So if that is foundationally not correct, like, it's not going to matter what's coming out of that. So I'd say that was kind of the first step for me, was to kind of invest in that layer, build that team out, make sure the foundational models are good. I'd say we're pretty early on in the automation journey. I think we've started with areas that we can extract value the quickest. So kind of low-hanging fruit to just prove ROI. Things like kind of manual reconciliations on the accounting team, journal entries, stuff that can help time to close go down, just eliminate a lot of the manual work. And we're starting to get to more, I think, advanced use cases now, where the FP&A team is using it not as like a replacement, but more as like an augmentation to get smarter with forecasts. If we look at a lot of usage-based data, what do we think that the GPT is going to say is a reasonable forecast? It's just as a pressure test for what we're doing. So yeah, I think we're pretty early on, but we see a pretty aggressive roadmap to kind of.
Could you walk us through one use case maybe in your team, sort of end-to-end, that's adding a lot of value?
Yeah, so Gorgias is a business. We do customer support software for e-commerce merchants. A lot of that is usage-based. And so there's a lot of seasonality involved. So a lot of customers, during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, will have high peak usage, and that will drop during certain months. One of the biggest business problems we have is figuring out, like, visibility and forecasting for a longer time horizon. How are customers going to behave? What's their usage patterns going to be like? And so that's been a really big challenge for us. And so what we've done is actually used AI and some like kind of machine learning to help us really have more predictive patterns of user behavior and individual customer level behavior, which has been a real game changer for us, for like across sales, for our post-sales team, to be able to identify even potential risk and churn candidates through that. So it's been a big help. And nothing is perfect. I don't think this is a replacement to a forecast, but it's a good pressure test to help us understand what other inputs are.
What tools did you use to do that, build that, or did you do it all in-house?
We used a couple of tools. So like we use Google Cloud, and then we have BigQuery as the underlying database. And then what we did was the data scientists on my team are basically trying to build some of the underlying logic. And then we use Periscope as kind of our visualization tool for that.
Sowmya, with yourself, before you left OpenAI, what was one process that you guys completely automated?
We actually took 2 very seriously early on. We automated revenue, and we automated our GPU cost reporting. And the reason for that is because in a time of hyper growth, you can't have people doing this work, because then you need to scale your people linearly if your growth is demanding that. So we said, okay, we're going to take the hardest problems for our team. So for revenue, we use Stripe. So a lot of the source transactional data was in Stripe. We were really close when I left. Yesterday, our data person pinged me and said 99% of GAAP revenue is going touchless from Stripe all the way to NetSuite, which means revenue close basically happens real time. I think for GPU costs, it's slightly more, manual right now. A lot of it has been automated and dashboarded, but I think the business logic is just more complex. But really, really happy about what we did for revenue.
And how did you guys do that? Was it mostly leveraging OpenAI or?
We leveraged OpenAI in not the way that you might expect, right? We're not feeding Stripe data through, LLM models and having it do that. The place we leveraged AI is we told our revenue accounting team, you basically need to teach yourself SQL and Python. And these are people straight out of CPAs, Big Four accounting background. They have not necessarily done any coding in their lives. But with a tool like ChatGPT to help them, we essentially put, very similar to what you described, Kunal, I also really insisted on having a data org inside our team. And I think having the finance data team being embedded in our org was a huge thing because they would actually see the pain points of the downstream people that needed that data. So we essentially had Stripe data flow into our data warehouse, and then the accounting team would use AI to write SQL, to write Python scripts, whatever you needed to do. We eventually built plumbing to send that transformed data into NetSuite for RevRec.
As a result of that implementation, what were some roles that just didn't need to exist anymore?
I think that for OpenAI, it wasn't so much that we had to, say, okay, these roles are no longer going to exist. We just didn't hire them to begin with. Because we were 10 people when we started and suddenly the business grew. And I'd say if we didn't invest in these tools, we would have probably been like a 200, 300 person finance team. For, if you look at our comparable kind of numbers and complexity, that's the peer size. So to operate a team like that with less than 50 people, we just didn't need to hire more than 2 or 3 revenue accounting people because we said your job is to kind of look at the alerts that are firing off when things go wrong. But if things are great, then you're not actually booking anything or doing anything. Yeah. Everything's automated and dashboarded, but of course, new products get launched, new things need to be set up, and the work is more so only the exceptions need to be handled.
Definitely.
Just to build off of what they both said, I think the important thing to recognize is our transaction volume is very low. We're enterprise, obviously you have a little bit of everything. I'm sure you have a variety of sizes. We're all looking for what is the thing I need to use AI. What is the thing I can use? What do I go get? And our CTO made this point at our sales kickoff. One of our reps was like, I need the use cases. And the CTO was like, the use cases are in the people and the processes. And there's not something you just take off the shelf. It's going to come from what you do at your company, what you do at your company. This is so early in what we're doing. And you would ask, why aren't agentic companies using it in finance? Finance and accountants, we didn't choose this lifestyle to take risk, right?
Yeah.
There's a cohort of people, well, I mean, many of us have self-selected backed into it. But the point being, those aren't the departments where people are on the bleeding edge, how can I be 98.3% right? And that 1.7% doesn't matter. That's not it.
There's a right answer and a wrong answer.
Right answer, wrong answer. And I think finding those use cases, pulling them back, and what we've done actually is we've had the same struggle, right? We're constantly out there pushing all these use cases across all parts of the company. We actually established a center of excellence / enablement, where the people who built these initial use cases are now going back and change management, mapping what are the necessary conditions inside of your team and how do you get people comfortable with it. I mean, it's been a lot is happening so quickly and it's exciting, but we're in early days, and so bringing people along for that journey and getting them to be comfortable with it is critical. It's a people management thing as much as a technology effort.
As you look into the future over the next 12, 24 months, how does your finance department look? What changes? What roles do you hire for? What roles you don't hire for?
I think Sowmya made the great point. It's not that roles will go away over the next 12, 24 months, but I hate to say it because this is where a lot of us started. Junior analyst roles are the ones that are ripe for we don't need those, right? Those are the agents that we can build. And again, maybe because we are a leaner team and the people that I have are of that mindset, they're looking for things to go automate and just kind of, not have to hire those junior roles or not have to hire more people to take those on. So that's kind of it. Now, I think, again, probably less hiring, more scalability inside of the existing organization is what the next year or two look like.
When you looked at your finance department, how did you determine what was like your rubric for deciding what I automate first?
That's a great question. I was actually just talking to our COE lead. He said it's risk, effort, and business value. Like that's the matrix to think through these use cases. And I literally sent a note to my team like 2 weeks ago saying, you're about to go through close, all the things that suck that you have to deal with, just write them down. Like take a note, take a sticky, and then we're gonna go through it with the COE and assess it in that matrix. There are things that like, it's not gonna be a perfect application for everything, but where it's, you know, the risk is appropriate, the effort is appropriate, and the business value is as high as can be, those are the places where you start, and then you start to knock them down from there.
Kunal, as you look into the future, how does your team change? Because you've got like these 3 teams working with you, right? The data, accounting, finance.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer that I don't necessarily, while there might be some slight kind of consolidation, I don't actually believe that this is going to be a purely agentic kind of workforce, right? I think what you're seeing is an evolution of what the team looks like. So I think a couple things that I'd say. One is I think the team structure gets a little flatter, right? I think in the traditional hierarchy, you have a lot of junior people doing kind of like more of the routine, data-intensive stuff, and then you have layers of mid-management, and then you have kind of more senior folks in the team. I think now that model changes a little bit where, you know, a lot of those ground level tasks don't need to be done by humans, or not all the way done. And I think what we're seeing is there's not a lot of things that are 100% getting replaced by AI agents. I think what we're trying to get people to do is less of the preparation and more of the reviewing. So I think what I see is what I want to do is hire more people who are going to really push the boundaries of what it means to be kind of a world-class finance team. And to me, that's connecting, you know, finance with operations, helping to influence decisions, and doing the storytelling. Those are not things that I think are going to be replaced anytime soon by an agent. But what enables them to do is like, hey, a lot of the routine things that take their time, a lot of the ground floor analysis, the pumping manual reconciliations, or doing a budget versus actual that could be 85% automated by AI. That's going to allow them to focus time on getting more embedded in the business, spending more time with their business partners, and now bringing operational insights to me and the rest of the team about how we can do things better or more connectedly.
You know, what I've seen is finance is this very political department, right? And when I'm on boards and everything, finance sort of comes together at the end and maybe a few weeks after the end of the month, unlike OpenAI, where the close is real time. And this makes the conversation in boardrooms very political, kind of, right? Like competing interests, the data is sitting everywhere.
You want to switch spots?
Yeah. So I think with everything you guys are saying, you're trying to break that, make the conversation more real time, bring the data to the front, so you can have a more collaborative discussion on finance to move the business forward. How is that happening in your organization at Gorgias?
Yeah, I mean, I aspire to be Switzerland, so I try to be kind of a neutral party, but you know, maybe we'll have some political leanings. But I think, yeah, what your point is, like, I think our role, I view a lot of my role as the chief accountability officer. So holding the rest of the team accountable for delivering, right, where we were veering on track, off track, and help kind of bring that connective tissue to bring there. And now the best way to do that is having core foundational data that the entire team can look at, right? So I think everybody knows here probably like the worst thing that can happen is if multiple people have sources of truth and a competing source of information, then the discussion never goes anywhere. So I think what we are trying to do is instrument the team to really think about how to drive those discussions. And I think where AI and agents can really help is giving them time to do that, right? And so the more that we can bring the data to the discussion, but then have a point of view. Like I think my controversial opinion is like data by itself is kind of useless. Like you need to be able to wrap it with a story and a point of view around what that means. And then you can debate that point of view. Like data is not the story, data is the kind of the canvas that you can write your story on. So I think that's going to be really important. But to get that and to have high quality is something that I think agentic finance can help with.
So Sowmya, with you carrying on that theme of story, how have you done that in the past, conveying the story?
I think, so my role is more narrowly focused on getting numbers that make sense and that are right? I'll give you guys an example to make this more tangible. So when I started at OpenAI, our GPUs were melting. Like we just had a lot of demand for GPUs. Everybody had a lot of, they wanted to know what's happening. Are the deliveries on track? How much, what is our cost of revenue, which is primarily driven by GPU costs? And we couldn't answer any of these questions until 15 days after the end of the month because, like, I kid you not, that's how long it took to handle the accounting for all of this in spreadsheets. And I'm not exaggerating. So basically what happened is, there's you get this Microsoft Azure report with all your GPUs, and there's different subscriptions with different costs and usage data and like what it's being used for. And then every time somebody deploys an engine or starts something and it's being used, it's a line in some spreadsheet. Post ChatGPT, this file just exploded on us. It became like 9 million rows for a month. And it's not like a complex spreadsheet, but when you have that many rows, you realize you can't even open it in Excel or anything because it has a 1 million row maximum, right? And people had to do all sorts of shenanigans to split that big 9 million row file into multiple files, do different things, and stitch it back together. And invariably, somebody messed some date cutoff off, and the total doesn't agree. Now you have to go audit, oh my gosh, which one got messed up? And it was this whole just brutal exercise to just get GPU cost numbers, and to figure out how much is cost of revenue and how much is R&D. We couldn't tell you. And I think storytelling makes sense, and you need to have the ability to put it in perspective. But in my opinion, a lot of teams are stuck because you can't build that story until you have the data, and sometimes this data comes from vendors and random forms that you can't neatly put into anything. And so in terms of the first big use case I tackled, it was actually this. Because what I realized is by the time you tell people these numbers, if it's the 15 business days after the end of the month, it's the 20th of the next month, nobody cares. Yeah. They're like, oh, cool, so we did that last month. They kind of shrug it off, and
it's
they're
like telling a ship you should have turned back there.
Yeah, it does not matter. And people just stop caring about the results if you give it to them late, was my big kind of eye-opening moment. And so we did a lot of work. We didn't have engineering help because the engineers are don't talk to me, we're trying to keep the site alive. Yeah. And so we turned to ChatGPT, we took our big spreadsheet, turned out you could describe what you're doing in Excel to ChatGPT, and it spit out a Python script. And Python is really fast, as you know, at running CSV processing. Yep. And what would take us, basically 10, 15 days was done in 10 seconds. It was a slap in our face for the team because it's what do you mean it got it done? This would have taken us so long. But the story naturally followed once you got your data right, because now we could publish a dashboard real time to say, this is what the deliveries are as of today, and this is where it's going. These engines are cost of revenue, these engines are R&D, and we realized we were becoming not just the storytellers after the fact, but really keeping. I love chief accountability officer, but that's really what was happening, right? We could tell our engineering teams, this is what's happening real time. If you're a vendor or if you're not getting what you want, go hold those people accountable. And I think tightening your process is, I personally, the first thing you got to do, because everything you do after that stems from that. It's
the time and process compression that allows, it used to be accounting would close the books and FP&A would be waiting, and you'd forklift over the financials and FP&A would go do the close packs and all of that. But to your point, now it's those linkages are tighter and tighter, and the business wants that information, should have that information sooner and sooner. So it's all the time compression that's made possible that allows you to steer the business or course correct or double down where things are working. That's where accounting and finance finally are starting to blur, right? And that's where, I think that's a great example.
What is one thing you guys did to streamline that storytelling, that process, the data?
That's, not GPUs for us, but AWS costs, right? Our biggest costs are people and cloud. Stand up if that's the case for you, right? So So for us, it was the same thing. You get this 70-page PDF from Amazon. Excuse me. You get some, some other dashboards, et cetera. But it was like, how do you make sense of it? What is production? What's not production? What's for this product? What's for that? So running that process through an optimization is another example that, I'd love to say we're done with, but we're in the middle of doing that as well.
Sowmya, tactically now, can we use OpenAI? Like, can everyone use OpenAI the way you described it?
Yes, you don't need anything more than access to chatgpt.com. I think you can get a lot of what I'm describing done even with a free account. Obviously, the higher tiers of subscription give you deep research and some of these like more advanced features. But I honestly think the big open secret for finance teams is that tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude make code accessible to everybody, and you don't need to be a programmer to be able to do that, to accelerate your own work. And the barrier to entry is really low, right? Anybody can just start talking to these tools. I think the challenge comes because you kind of need to see someone doing it, in my opinion. I demoed this to my own team at an offsite. Until then, everybody said, ChatGPT is so cool, but it doesn't help my job. And this was people in OpenAI's own finance team feeling that way.
When you said demo this, was it that GPU?
I basically took our GPU process, manual process, and I real-time wrote this Python script and ran it. And the team offsite was like 10 people. It was very low-key. But it was enough to say, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that in front of us right now. And it gave people something to like go try out of
It demystifies it
yeah.
for people, totally.
So I'm a, say, Series A finance person. What are like 2 or 3 things you absolutely recommend? I don't have a massive budget.
Yeah.
That you recommend I do tactically.
Like do in ChatGPT, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, like coding your bank activity, coding your expenses. If you're spending a lot of time combing through various GL accounts to find anomalies, you can just feed that stuff into ChatGPT and say, find me T&E that looks off. Then it's just going to ignore any Uber expenses under $20. It's not going to care about. If it sees an Uber cost for $2,500, it can surface that to you. It's like all the little things that you would otherwise have to do in a little spreadsheet by yourself, you can have conversations about and get it done much faster.
Ahsan, how about yourself? What is your recommendation for a CFO just starting out in early stage, or not early stage, but like a Series A company?
Find out and then come tell me. I mean, I think those. I mean, I inherited a lot of legacy systems and processes and that sort of thing. I think if you're building from the ground up, it is more of a blank slate. And so, short answer, I don't have any advice other than listen to my peers who have done this inside of shops in that way. But I guess the other one is to think about, to just bias yourself first towards how can the AI or the agent help me versus I need to go hire for someone. And I think more and more of these recipes, these tools, this sharing will happen that will, I think, accrue to the benefit of companies that are building from the ground up now.
Kunal, how about yourself? What's your advice at the Series A stage?
I would say one is invest early in the integrity of your underlying data, right? Because again, if the data is corrupt, nothing you're going to do is going to be worthwhile. So I think investing in the right underlying data architecture that you can get out. And I think the second thing is like at a Series A, you got to just really define like what the scope is of like what the finance team really needs to do, right? Because you're going to be constrained. Your team is focused probably on finding product market fit, on scaling. And so I think the challenge is be really clear about like what the mandate of the finance team is and also what it's not going to do. Because I think the trouble you're going to have is if you're trying to be like a world-class strategic finance team with one person and a CFO or a head of finance and like they're chasing around all these things, it's just never going to work. So I think you got to constrain it and like maybe put some barriers around like, hey, we got to close the books, have high integrity in our underlying accounting numbers, and we're not going to drive a ton of like sophisticated forecasting or underlying, maybe the rigor of what you're doing. So I think it's about applying the constraints of what you can do and then figuring out which of those processes can you automate, or at least, again, try to get 70, 80% of the way there instead of replacing all the way.
In your department now, in your function, Kunal, what's one tool you guys can't live without?
We built, there's a tool that I built all the time. Again, I think we have the advantage of having this kind of bigger data team, but we built like a semantic layer on our database. So it's great for me because I can interact with it in like real English, and I can ask them like, hey, how many churn customers did we have in the last 3 months in our SMB segment? How does that compare with last year? How many segments churn customers did we have last year? How many new customers did we add? So I can talk to it like I'm talking to someone on my team, but I don't actually need my team to respond to me. They're just giving me all the answers from that. And I use that tool like multiple times a day. So that to me is like one of my most valuable tools.
Sowmya, I guess it's OpenAI all the way through.
I think once you have a team that knows how to use ChatGPT in their work, you can't go back. I think if we told the team, hey, you can't have this anymore, everyone would like throw a riot. You get used to a very fun and easier way of getting your work done that you just can't go back.
And let me guess, Ahsan, it's going to be SnapLogic's.
For us, it's our own, because and again, with our customer base, we use a lot of proprietary information that's not going to be fed into, into one of the larger consumer-facing LLMs. So we started using it for ourselves that way, and our customers are obviously very sensitive to that too.
And those are like your own small language models that you create on top.
Yeah, they're specialized models, and again, they're standing them up for pharma, for manufacturing. But actually, even within companies that are big enough, are going to have their own patterns, their own use cases. So regardless, that's our customers, but we're doing it the same way in terms of building agents for ourselves and building on top of them and evolving them has been critical for us.
Awesome. I'd like to take some questions from the audience. The mic's right there, so whoever wants to, let's take like the next 10, 15 minutes to get any questions. Yeah, the mic's right there, so you can just walk up to the mic and we'll take some questions.
Great, thank you. I'm curious, how can a company like mine use ChatGPT and input confidential data and keep it secure?
ChatGPT has an enterprise subscription tier where you get your own cloud environment. At that point, it's not any different from trusting your data with any other cloud service provider. Don't do it on personal or free accounts. It's fine.
Any other, yeah, please.
Great talk, guys. Do you have any examples of how you've enabled product go-to-market to move faster with automation? It's something I'm thinking about a lot. Like, how do we not hire a deal desk, but rather automate that? I mean, any examples or perspectives on like outside of finance actually like driving growth velocity more efficiently or anything like that?
Customer 360. I mean, like you're stitched to the data point and clean data, like stitching together all that information, a cube that people can go interact with, ask questions. Like that's the biggest one, and that's it's product usage, it's finance, it's accounting, it's everything in there. We have our own visualization service, but a lot of it ends up in Looker. That's just because we use that, but yeah.
There's two things. One is we built like our own internal like churn risk score. So for the go-to-market teams, customer success teams, to kind of identify which customers we think are the highest risk of churn. That's been somewhat helpful for them to kind of go and attack those customers. The other thing we did is kind of look at inbound leads to be able to score inbound leads based on like market data, being able to like enrich those inbound leads with more information, decision makers, past history. It's just given the reps a little bit more information to deal with and like how to kind of route things a little bit better. So, the more information you can arm them with, the better.
Hey, Lloyd. Hi, guys. Thanks for being here. Quick question. So I'm a founder of a company called Vasool.ai. We automate collections and accounts receivable. So my question is, as a CFO, other than security and compliance, what other risks or things that scare you in terms of automating your businesses?
Maybe we're part of the same, like risk and compliance and data information leakage are the ones that I worry about. Otherwise, like have at it. It's my
Yeah, I think I think that's right. I mean, the biggest risk is just data, customer data leaking and doing those things. I think the other part is that's scary, and like we sell AI agents to our merchants, and I think it's a similar risk that I feel is the risk of like automation. You're taking a certain set of logic, and now you're taking that as like the truth, and there's not edge cases. And so if something, especially that's something that's touching the customer, you have to be overly sensitive about. And so things like automation, like collections, AR, those are like really actually helpful things and manual things to go after, right? But now what can be a trigger point though is like maybe there's a customer that you've arranged a relationship with of like, hey, we know you're paying us at 60 days instead of 30 days. And somehow that logic gets lost and you're reaching out for collections. That's like now a damage to a human relationship. And so like I think those things are the tricky points. They're all like solvable and you have to deal with some kind of band of error. But I think that customer-facing relationship, making sure that's high integrity, that's really important.
Hey guys, thank you for everything you're saying. I haven't heard this yet, and I don't mean this as a negative at all, but I haven't heard you say the CFO is dead.
Yeah.
And so I want to understand that a little more, because to me, a CFO runs strategy and thinks forward for the company and uses those things to decide decision making. So can you explain a little more why that's the title?
Well, that was just
to get you here.
That was just to get this audience. you got to be a little Conor McGregor to draw an audience. That's what I did. But
I think it would be fair to say that the CFO is not dead; it's evolving. The legacy CFO, the legacy CFO has changed. I think among this group, and if you extended it out, what we're responsible for is shifted. And where we get involved is shifting a lot faster than it has over the course of my career. So yeah.
Any other questions? I think Ray has a question. All right, let's give it up for this panel.